どうも、独学日本語の JD ウェズゴです。本日もよろしくお願いします。Oh, there's a big echo. I think I know the problem. Apologies. I had my audio on. Okay. So, I wanted to say thanks to all of you who have joined in or will be watching this in the future. As you can see, this is still a beta, so there's still a few problems I have to work out. You might have heard some sound issues in the beginning. I think it's because I had a window open, which was showing the stream. So it kind of got into a loop, but I think I just solved that one now. Anyway, so some of you may have joined the first session I did last week around the same time, and some of you may be new. But just to give you an idea of this, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be talking about Japanese learning. Pretty much almost any topic is open for discussion. For example, grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation, maybe even some cultural stuff. Pretty much anything goes, and I want to be as interactive as possible. I've set up things such that the latency is pretty low. So I should see your chat in roughly, I think, 5 seconds, or the update should be about 5 seconds. So last time, I think we did an okay job of trying to keep up with the chat messages, and I'll try to do the same this time. So definitely at any time, either related to the current topic, or if you have a question, something you want to ask about, feel free to definitely chime in and ask a question. And questions I don't finish, I may be able to either address in a future episode or maybe even make a blog post. And by the way, if you just happen to stumble upon this from somewhere, I'm JD Wisgo from the site self-taught-japanese.com, which is a blog that I've been running for many years now. Has about 900 articles about Japanese stuff. But anyway, so basically what I want to do is I do have a lesson prepared, but if anybody has any questions, you can definitely feel free to ask them now or anytime during. So what I want to do is I'm going to switch to my desktop here. And let's see, I'm still getting used to the editing tool here. And if I switch to, let's see, desktop. Okay. So all of you should be able to see my desktop now, which is great. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just kind of go over a basic lesson related to YOL, which is Y-O-U. So I'm going to go ahead and show you this as much as possible interactively. And this is a question somebody asked. It might have actually been from George. I don't actually 100% remember, but I think it was. And sometimes when I get messages, you may see me kind of pulled off back and forth so I can track everything in real time. So anyway, so what we're going to do is start with a bit of a lesson here on YOL. So let me switch to, and this is, by the way, for those of you who missed last time, these are the notes that I took, and you can feel free to watch the other link for the previous one. It was a smaller crowd, but I still made it public. And we talked about verb tenses and stuff. It was pretty fun. We had a good time. So this time I'm going to be starting from here, and I'm going to just talk about YOL. All right. And I want to give, as many examples as possible and make this as easy to understand. So one thing I'm going to be doing here is I'm not going to really assume you know too much kanji, because I know it can take years to learn kanji fluently. I'm going to, for now, assume that you know katakana and hiragana. However, if you don't, let me know, and you want me to use romaji, then definitely, we'll try to work that in. So I want it to be as easy enough for the learners who are at that level, and then maybe advanced enough for the other people. So I'm going to try to make everybody happy. We'll see if this works. And I see George just chimed in. Thanks again, George. So yeah, it was him. So he's saying he got confused with all the many uses of YOL, especially when combined with tame. All right. So I'm going to start with YOL for now, and if we have time, we'll focus on the tame case. But the YOL itself, there's a lot to talk about. So let's kind of do an overview of that. So again, what I want to talk about, this is YOL, and I'm not going to do, I guess I don't need romaji. But this here, and just to distinguish, right, there's a different YOL, which is the particle, right? So sodayo, right, this is the YOL particle, right? This is a totally different comment. So to give an example of the YOL that we're even talking about, right? Let's see, what's an example? Sagi no yoni hayai. Okay, so this is just, in cases where I use kanji for now, I'm just gonna probably put in little furigana here, so we can see for those of you who don't know kanji that well. So for this example here, and this is just to show you which yo I'm talking about, because like I said, it might be confusing between the sodayo, which is the yo particle, which is used for emphasis or new information. This yo we're talking about, which is the one here, see if I can bold that. This is the yo we're going to be talking about, right? So in this example, usagi no yo ni hayai, right? And this hayai is just the furigana of this here. So this is basically what we're going to be talking about, all right? So what does yo mean? And by the way, before I go back to that, the other yo, the particle yo, can actually be, it almost sound the same. You can say sodayo, like if you're joking, and you can kind of extend the vowel, which it might even sound a little bit like this, but it's a different word. So just if this is extended, it's still the yo particle used for emphasis or new information. All right, so what does yo mean fundamentally at a really basically low, at a low level, right? Because depending on different uses, it can be more or less, it can take on different uses depending on the context, right? So what I want to do here is show you that yo here means something like or appearance. As when looked at it by itself, it's kind of hard to really grasp the meaning, because it definitely, at least from a translation point of view, it changes a lot depending on the context, right? So let's look at a few example sentences. So, and this is for the most simplest use of this. We're going to talk about a few different uses. So the use here that we started off with, which is usagi no yo ni hayai, okay? So in this case here, the yo here, it means basically the like or the appearance or as, right? So what it means basically, what I'm going to do is, sometimes translation is hard to capture all the nuance, but I have gotten requests from readers, watchers, that they want to, try to focus on at least having some translation. So I'm going to try to have a translation. It may not capture the full nuance. In this case, I think it does, because it's a pretty straightforward word. So this would be fast like a rabbit. Okay. So here, the yo is basically being used to modify the usagi, or it's being used to connect to the usagi, the rabbit, right? So, and the ni here is giving an adverbial function to it. In other words, it's saying, what does adverbial mean? It's a way to describe a verb, right? It's the way a verb works, right? Like eat quickly, right? Quickly is an adverb. So here, this no yoni usage is adverbial. So what I'm going to do is just put this up here as a general, right? Adverbial, right? And usually there's always going to be something before it. Right, and this no here may not always be there, but for now we'll just focus on that. So basically for this, we have fast like a rabbit. So it can be in other uses. It can be after verbs, for example. And this is another really common use. So what we can say is kodomo ga, and again I'm going to try to do the kodomo ga. Let's say neta. Right, we'll try to keep this simple. Neta. Yo desu. Right, and this time we'll use desmasu. Right, so kodomo ga neta yo desu. Right, and with all the furigana, it's a little hard to read, but kodomo ga neta yo desu. So here, and I'll try to bold all these like I usually do in my articles, because it's a little easier to see sometimes. This is basically, it's it has the appearance of the child who went to sleep, but the easiest way to think of this is it seems, right, like the child has went to sleep. I could say slept, I guess, which means almost the same thing, but went to sleep I think is a little more natural. So here it seems that the child has went to sleep. Kodomo ga neta yo desu. So notice the difference here, and this is actually not an adverbial usage, right, because there's no ni, and the verb that's involved is actually before the yo, not after it. So it's a very different usage, but it's still used in the sense of the appearance, which here seems is kind of like, maybe you saw something, or you heard it, or you just got the feeling maybe the child is now quiet, so you think he or she is sleeping. So that's basically what this connotates. So let's look at another type of usage along the same line. So what about we already used no yoni. We could also say usagi. We'll use a different word here. Kuma, which is bear, right? Kuma no yona kakko, right? And kakko is an interesting word. You probably know it from kakkoi, right? Which means cool, or some stylish, that kind of thing, or kakko tsukeru, kakko tsuketeru, somebody's trying to act cool, like they're a big deal. That's the same word here, but in this case, it has a little bit different meaning. It's more of like the appearance, or actually appearance is, it's more like a physical, almost like clothing, like the way someone looks, what they're wearing, like this is my kakko type thing. So this is kind of a noun phrase. It's not a complete sentence, but I think it's still sufficient enough, for talking about this point. So here, this is basically, you could say a look. Now in English, look has a lot of meanings, but it can have a connotation of what someone's wearing or their clothes. That's a nice fresh look she's wearing, or that kind of thing, right? So a look like a bear, kuma, right? Kuma no you na kakko, right? So that's basically another way to use it. So here, in the previous case, we have basically a verb phrase, right? Kodomo ga neta. And this could be past, or it could be non-past, it could be teiru form, it can be different forms. But we put the yo right after it. Here, similar to the first example, right? And I guess maybe we can number these to make it a little easier to... We can see this example here, we have a noun, right? So first we had a noun, when an adverbial usage with yo, and then we had a noun phrase where it's just neta yo, like that's the way that we're connecting it. Now we have a noun again, but this time we don't want to use the adverbial usage. We want to use it as an adjectival usage, right? And notice I have a na there. So what I can do here is show this here, no yo na, and this is the adjectival usage, right? And again, maybe you don't always think in terms of adverbial and adjectival, in terms of English, but it's a big difference because adjectival is basically modifying a noun, right? Generally, right? And then this is modifying a verb or an adjective, if I remember correctly. Maybe that's less common. So here we want to modify not a verb as we did in number 1, but we want to modify a noun, right? So it's really a noun modifying a noun. So we have kuma no yona, right? Like a kakko. So if we just had no na here, it would be incorrect grammar because yo, however you want to look at it, it needs to be connected some way. It's not an I adjective. It's not like atsui or samui, something that can directly, it's not a verb, which can also connect directly, right? Sudo, kakko, that type of thing. You can definitely have those things connecting directly. But in this case, it's not really a verb. It's not an I adjective. So the bottom line is it's just a pattern to remember, right? No yo na, kuma no yo na kakko, right? And let's see if there's any other examples we can think of this. So there's another usage which is a little bit different, which is such that. So let's yoni. And this is similar to the adverbial, but it is adverbial, but this is such that, right? And let me give you a clear example because that by itself is a little confusing, not really clear. So if we have, let's see, what's an example? Let's see, testo ochinai yoni gambaru, right? So we have gambaru here, gambaru, right? And then we have ochinai, so we get the furigana in, right? Testo ochinai yoni gambaru, right? And ochiru literally means to fall, but if you're failing a test, or another way to say this maybe would be a little bit more natural. You could say it either way, but you could say testo ni gokaku suru yoni. That's another way to say it too, right? And gokaku here means pass, right? Like you succeed in getting a C or a B or whatever you need to do, right? So testo ni gokaku suru yoni gambaru. So here it's definitely an adverbial usage, right? Because we have the ni and we have a clear verb that we're modifying, right? It's actually, let me take that back. It's kind of adverbial, but basically it's not adverbial in the same way. So in this way, in number, what's an example here? This case here, this one's actually not a, let me show you a simpler example here. Testo. An simple example of an adverb would just be like hayaku, just to just to show you what I'm talking about with that. Hayaku taberu, like I said. This is a very simple, you have a verb and then it's modifying the verb. This is like the simplest possible adverbial usage. So the adverbial usage here, I mean, I don't even know if you want to think of it as adverbial, but you're doing a verb such for something else to be achieved. Basically, you have a goal. You want something to get done or something to happen. So you're doing it for an objective, for a goal. You could probably think of that as an adverbial usage. And grammatically it is, but it's a little different than the case of hayaku taberu, which is like it directly describes how you're doing the verb. So it's a little bit different than adverbial. So anyway, so the point here is we're trying gambaru, right? In order so that something happens. Testo ni goukaku suru you ni gambaru, right? So this is basically to try, and sometimes people say hard because gambaru has some nuance to it. To try hard in order to pass the test, right? And you could also say like to try in order to you could say a little more long-winded way to try such that you pass the test. The same idea, but you may want to think in terms of such that, or in order to. That's basically here, such that, and I can put this up here, in order to. So this is sort of a different use, right? Where you're doing something for the purpose of something else, and you can actually sometimes you could actually drop the ni here. So what an example of that would be like. What's an example? Rikai suru yo doryoku shimasu. Right? Just use some different words to get some practice here. So this is doryoku, which means kind of like to try. Pretty much the same idea as gambaru, right? And this is rikai. Right? Rikai, you may have heard it means similar to wakaru, means to understand, right? So here, we could have put a ni here, but we don't actually have to. And this is a pretty common, I guess, abbreviation. In sentences like this, when you're doing something for the purpose to achieve some goal, or in order to do something, right, you don't really need a ni. And this is totally fine. Rikai suru yo doryoku shimasu. Now there's another usage, which is a bit different than this, different than all the above ones that I gave so far. Oh, by the way, I just saw Jim joined and said a comment. Hey, Jim, thanks for joining. I see his hooray live stream there. Good to see you. So back to the topic. The one for this one is basically if you're asked to do something. It's kind of like a request, or if you're being ordered. So let's give a clear example of that, right? Katazukeru yo ni to iwaremashita. Right, and I'm purposely trying to use some different forms, different grammatical forms, just to give all of you practice. So again, for the kanji here, this is iwaremashita, and this is katazukeru. So katazukeru is to clean up, to organize, that type of thing. Organize is probably a closer version, or a better literal translation. And now here, and I should probably highlight this again to make it easier, we see this katazukeru yo ni to iwaremashita, right? So if you're not too familiar with this verb form, this is the passive form. So you, right? And again, this is one of those verbs that's very common, but is irregular. So just to kind of give a quick refresher of that, you, normally you pronounce this you, but the normal pronunciation, the non-literal pronunciation is you, so it's kind of like you, like this, you. So, and that applies to a bunch of the forms. There's some situations where it could sound like I, like itta, and that's the wrong kanji. Itta. Here, this could be itta or yutta. So it gets a little complicated, but when I say you, I'm talking about this verb, right? And the reason I was mentioning this is iwaremashita. It's actually not yuwaremashita. And I think that might actually be a valid, but the one I hear much more often is iwaremashita. And this is the passive. So something happened, right? Korosu, to kill. Korosareta, was killed, right? So it's the kind of the passive of that. So this here, I mean, in English, you would say, I was told, or he, she, somebody was told. So it's basically, in Japanese, this is used very often, especially because we omit subjects and objects, and it's kind of by context. So what this means is basically that I, the speaker, was told, such that to do something. So, and a more natural translation would be like I, and again, the I here is implied, right? I'll put it down. There's no boku wa or atashi wa, watashi wa, whatever, ore wa, but it's kind of implied. It is implied, especially depending on the context. So basically, you can say I was asked, or literally you could say I was told such that I clean up, right? And again, the I here is not literally in the sentence. This one isn't here either. They're kind of implied. But this is more the literal translation of this, right? Which is I was told such that I clean up, which sounds a little awkward. So you could translate this or kind of refactor this to sound a little better. And it also helps to understand, right? I was asked to clean up, right? Which sounds a lot better. And it almost matches pretty well. So this is another usage of this, right? So, and I'm trying to see, there's another one that I was just thinking about, and I think I wrote an article on this one a few years ago. So here's another one. Genki ni narimasu yoni. Now, let's say you just say that, right? Just that. And, you know, in Japanese, a lot of times there's unsaid words. So in this case, this is actually kind of one thing that kind of keys you off to this phrase. And this is kind of an extension of one of the other usages. But the narimasu it kind of sticks out because you may notice that usually when we use mas, des, and mas forms, most of the time, like 90% of the time, it's at the end of the sentence, right? It's pretty rare for it to be in the middle. I mentioned, you know, examples like akemashite omedetou. I mean, there's cases where like that in other cases, but you know, usually you put it at the end of the sentence. So there's actually something kind of implied here. And what that is sort of a wish or a prayer, depending on, you know, the context. But what this means is, you know, I hope that, or I pray, or that I wish that you or somebody gets better or healthy. As you know, genki has a few different nuances, right? It has an active, vigorous, you know, genki. It also has like get healthy, right? So if you're sick, you want to get better, right? Genki natta, right? You get better. So again, it depends on the context. But this is something like I hope. You can almost say pray. Again, it depends on the person's situation. That you, and again, the you is also implied, right? Notice there's no objects or subjects, right? In terms of you, me, I, it, those things just aren't even there, right? You know, I could say, boku wa anata ga genki ni narimasu yoni. You know, but if it's obvious from the context or you can figure it out, you know, most of the time Japanese, we just don't say it, right? I hope, pray that you get better, right? That would be probably one of the more common usages of this, right? So this is another one. Now I'm trying to think if there's any other ones. Okay. Let me just give you, I mentioned this on Twitter. This is a common example. Oh, I remembered. I remembered. Before I talk about that, there's one other major use, one or two other major uses. So this is, let's do this here. So let's say, I'll give you a longer sentence, which I thought about ahead of time. Kanojo wa hikoshimashita. Right? You could say, sono uchi, mainichi, sanpo suru yoni. It's going to be tricky to do furigana for all these. Maybe I'll start skipping out. But mainichi, sanpo suru yoni, narimashita. Okay? So, and I'm not going to keep going back up here because it's going to be, I guess, disturbing. So I'll just kind of work in one space here. But this here is the Yoni Naru, right? And this is a really common phrase, which is something that you really want to know. So here, and I'm going to highlight the whole thing because it's really sort of, it could be Yoni Naru or Yoni Narimashita, Yoni Nari. There's a lot of different variations. But this here, kanojo wa hikoshimashita. So hikoshimashita is past tense, the polite past tense of hikosu, which is to move, like as in you move your house, you know, not just you're physically moving, but you actually move your location where you live, right? And then sono uchi, which is eventually, mainichi sanpo suru yoni narimashita. So of course, mainichi is every day, right? Oops, mainichi, right? And then sanpo, which maybe you know or not, is walk. Like you go on a friendly walk for entertainment or for health with you or your family, that type of thing. So that's what that means. So kanojo, and as you probably know, kanojo can mean she or it can mean girlfriend. In this context, anything goes. If I had to guess, I would say she, but it could be either way, right? So again, this is a new form that we haven't really talked about, right? So, and here we go. You can write this in the second time. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah, that sounds good. That's a good point, George. Yeah, maybe I'll try that for some of the future ones. Because yeah, I'm trying to struggle and see if the hiragana. So yeah, maybe I'll try that next time. Good idea. So anyway, for this one here, we have Yoni narimashita. So here, yo, again, it means appearance. It's kind of a general vague word of like almost like a state. If you want to think of it, that's how kind of I think of it. And then naru is to become, right? Sensei ni naritai, I want to become a teacher, that type of thing, right? Bimbo natta, I became poor. Yumeijin ni natta, right? I became famous, whatever. So there's a lot of ways to use naru, right? And naru also has other meanings that are unrelated, like to cry. Or no, sorry, that's naku. I meant to say to ring, like ring a bell, suzu ga naru. And there's even some other ones too. But for our purposes, this is to become, right? So literally, this became to the state of where she was walking every day. And that kind of captures the feeling of the meaning. So if I were to translate this, she moved, and this is purposely a simple sentence, right? Eventually, now again, it's hard. This is one where it's hard to translate completely into English, where it captures all the nuance, but I'll do my best for that. She began taking walks every day. Okay? You have a typo there. So notice I used, from a translation point of view, I used began. And in this case, I think it does totally fit. It's a pretty good translation. She began taking walks every day. But literally, it doesn't quite match. If you wanted to back translate this, you might say sanpo shi hajimeru or something like that, that would have a little bit different meaning. But in this case, just matching up this Japanese sentence passage and English passage, I think it's a pretty good translation. So this basically means she got to the state of doing that. And one of the reasons I think that this state, is used, this passage or this grammar pattern is used, is because Japanese really doesn't have a future tense, right? You can't really say will. Let me see. Hikoshimashita. Okay, I just got a message. And I guess apparently there's different ways to write this. Hikoshimashita. Okay, so this either way is valid. Apparently this way is more common. Yeah, so that's fine. So we'll use this one, but there's at least 2 or 3 ways I think to write hikoshimashita, but we'll use this one because it seems to be better. So anyway, what I was saying is, in Japanese, there's really no will, right? I mean, you don't say I will, she will do this, that type of thing. So that's one of the reasons I think for this. Now, there's another meaning that's similar to this. So let me show you that, and then we can compare. I'll just rewrite it, so I can take out the furigana. Kanojo wa, and I'll just leave that part out. Sono uchi, mainichi, sanpo suru you ni shimashita. Right? So this is where it gets interesting. So we have the same pattern, and this is, by the way, a very common, what's sure what the word is, pair. There's probably a better word for that, but 2 things, maybe dichotomy, to get technical here, but it's basically naru versus suru, right? Naru is to become, something happens on its own, right? What would be an example? Akaku natta, it became red, right? He, she, that became red. Akaku shita, I made it red. So that sounds a little weird out of context, but the point is, suru is someone is actively doing it, right? Naru is it becomes. So when we look at this here, and this is another grammar pattern that's important to know. Suru yoni shita, suru yoni, suru. And this could be any verb, right? It could be gambaru yoni shimashita. It could be any verb, and you just connect it like this, right? You just put it right in front of the yoni shimashita. So what this means here is basically she made an effort to do that, right? And this, to be honest, this sentence might be a little awkward because I just tried to squeeze in the grammar to compare these two, but eventually she began trying to take walks every day. And I think this is probably okay. Oh, I see. Oh, okay, yeah, I see. This was hikoshimashita. Yeah, sorry, I just checked my. And this is just for the record, hikoshimashita. Okay, anyway, she began trying to take walks. So the difference is like, she began trying. And the word trying has a lot of connotation, a lot of different meanings to it. But in here, trying is basically you're making an effort, an attempt. You may not actually achieve it, but she's basically taking an effort, right? She's doing, and this fits pretty well with our such that, in order to, meaning, right? She's doing such that she takes a walk. And then in the case of the one we looked at here, which is similar, suru yo or suru yo ni doryoku shimasu, or rikai suru yo ni doryoku shimasu, right? She's going to, or he or she is going to be making an effort such that they can understand, right? So in that case, it's like you do something and then you achieve a state, which is the state of understanding. Here, it's a little different because the state that you achieve is that you're doing something, right? And why don't you say, that's weird, right? I mean, you're trying to make it's almost like you're trying to force yourself, but it makes sense, right? Because all of us, we have habits, and sometimes doing something every day, whether it's studying Japanese or playing an instrument or whatever, it's a lot of work, right? It's hard to find the time. So that's why I think this makes it. Sanpo suru you ni shimashita, right? Basically made an effort for that. And then the one I was going to mention before, I want to mention this again. I put it on Twitter just as an example of something fun. But naru yo ni shika naranai. So this is another example of yo ni, right? And if you look at this, it may be a little bit messy and you may be like, what's going on there, right? So again, this uses naru twice. So a simpler way to write this sentence, which is almost the same meaning, it's a little different, but is naru yo ni naru, right? And again, what does this mean, right? So naru is become, but it also has a sense of happen, as in like an event happens without you controlling it. It could be like a fate type of thing, but it happens, it occurs, right? So this here, naru yo ni naru, is like it becomes how it becomes, which is actually kind of leading us into the direction of this, which is like what will be. What will be. I know this is this que sera, sera. There's some interesting, I don't know how to spell that. Oh, it's S-E-R-A, I guess, and there's supposed to be a hyphen or something there. Anyway, so this and this are almost the same thing, right? We have naru yo ni naru, which is just becomes as become. And then just as a refresher, because again, I know people at different levels are going to be watching this, and you might be watching it later because it's not necessarily live. So just for those of you who don't know this pattern, and this is a really common pattern, right? There's shika nai pattern, right? And then basically this is like everything but, right? So it's not, but is literally, but let's look at a simple example, right? 5 ドル shika nai, or shika motte inai, right? So I only have $5. I have nothing but $5. Now you could say 5 ドル dake motteru. That sounds okay. I guess it sounds a little unnatural to me, but this is what I would say. いくら持ってんの? 5 ドルしか持ってないよ, right? I only have $5. So anyway, now that we had a refresher of this this example here, we can go up and see that we have the same sort of thing here, except the shika is here, right? I almost need a different color for this, but I don't have colors. Where's my color? Here's a color. So we use purple. Shika. So here's the shika, and then here's the nai, right? So they're kind of jacked into the sentence like that. And what this is basically, it's just a double negative, right? It will not become except such that it will not become. So naru yo ni, you know what? I think that's a typo. Naru yo ni. Sorry about that. Now I was going to say, it doesn't make sense to be naru yo ni shika naranai. Okay, this is correct. Naru yo ni shika naranai. Makes much more sense. Because what we're saying is, it will only become except that it will become. It's a little hard to literally translate it. But the point is, it's only going to become how it's going to become. Exactly. What will be, will be. Que sera, sera. Right, whatever that is. So this is just one way to translate that common expression, or kotowaza, as you probably have heard it before. So basically here, this is another usage of that. So I'm trying to think if there's any other yo. I guess I want to take a pause here and say to George, is there any other usages of yo that you think I missed, or do you want to mention the tame? I'm not quite sure what usage you were alluding to. Can you give me a sentence or some other hint for that? Then I can try to explain that. Yo with tame, I'm trying to think I could probably construct a sentence, but I wanted to see if there's anything specific. So I'm going to keep going on, but if you can think of any sentences, yeah, let me know. Okay, so we get a comment here from Mr. Pichu. Thanks for the comment. For sentence 7, does it imply that your walking became a habit, while sentence 8 is just starting the action? Okay, so 7 is basically like she began. This is like, okay, so let me read your question. Let me put this here because I don't think I'm not sure people that watch this will be able to see the comment. So sometimes I may do this just to kind of be able to see it on the screen at once. So the question here is for sentence 7, does it apply to walking? So 7 is, yeah, it became a habit, or it started happening. This is almost like a natural thing. It just happened, right? It's almost like her body, not like she was a zombie or anything, but it just started happening. It became a habit. So I agree. This is correct. Does it apply that walking became a habit? Yes. It started, she got into the habit of it. So I agree. That's a pretty good interpretation. While sentence 8 is just starting the action. So sentence 8 is more like, not quite. So what I would say is it's more like she started making an effort for it. So, I mean, you have to think of Yoni Naru more in the big picture, right? It's not like this instant, right? I'm not going to say like, what's an example? Like, I try to drink it. Nomu Yoni Naru, right? That's a little weird. It's talking about the big sense, right? So if I say, 来週、日本語をいっぱい勉強するようにします, right? In other words, I'm going to do such that I study a lot of Japanese next week, right? So in that case, and I'll write that one down too because I think I stumbled over it. But 来週、日本語をいっぱい勉強するようにします。Right? 来週日本語をいっぱい勉強するようにしました。Or します. Either way, します makes more sense because it's going to be next week, right? So the point is, it's like, it's not necessarily the momentary effort, right? It's more like I'm going to put it on my schedule. I'm going to keep it in mind. That's probably one way to think about it. And I'm going to just make an effort. And you can actually use, you can do this too. You could say, let's change out the sentence. 今週日本語をいっぱい勉強するようにしてます. Right? So I'm making an effort. I'm trying to study. So it's a little more about that. So if that answers your question, yes or no, let me know. I'm going to jump back to George because I see he's pasted some happy stuff here. So what I'm going to do is, this looks like a fun sentence to analyze. So what I'm going to do is take this and we'll paste this in and just pick it apart. Still got some time left. Okay, so let's analyze this. So I'm gonna take my time with these sentences. They're somewhat advanced, and I want to make sure everybody on the table or in the session is following along with what's going on. So we'll go one by one. And so what I'm going to do is, I'm not going to do furigana, but I will pronounce the pronunciations so you can all follow along. So 政府は the government 病院へ検査の結果の書類をもらいに行かなくてもスマートフォンでももらうことができるようにすることも考えています. Okay, that's a big sentence. And that actually reminded me of another usage, which I want to actually go back and talk about. I'm going to do that sentence, but I want to do this last usage that I forgot because this one is really common, and then I'll get right back to that sentence. So the last usage, the one that I think I use a lot, is it's similar, but it's for the potential, right? So what's an example? ピアノをうまく弾けるようになりますよ. All right, so I could put more context around this, but I'll just keep it simple for now. ピアノをうまく弾けるようになりますよ. So this is, again, something that's happening. There's a typo. Something that's happening, right? You're becoming a state. The state is where you can play the piano well. Because when I read that sentence, it reminds me of this. Anyway, let's go back to the sentence now. So, 政府は病院へ検査. So what I want to do is, we'll kind of pick it apart in pieces, so we can understand the pieces instead of just explaining the grammar in question. So 政府は, which is, like I said, government, 病院へ検査の結果の種類をもらいに行かなくても. So this is all one idea, this one phrase, right? So 行かなくても is if you don't go, right? And this is basically the government. So if the government doesn't go to the hospital, right? E is kind of the same as ni. It just sounds a little more literary, little stiff. 検査の結果, which of course is the result of a test, probably a medical test from context, right? の書類. So that's the document. So basically the forms, the documents about the test, the result of the test, right? O morai ni. So morao means receive. In this case, you can think of it as toru or tori ni. Pretty much means the same thing. Tori ni is more like you're grabbing it, right? But morai is more like you go to receive. So you're going and somebody's giving it to you. That's the nuance. So this is even if the government, and now this seifu wa I think is actually more connected to the end of the sentence. So basically, if you don't go to get to the hospital to get the result of the test, right? Okay, smartphone demo, which of course is smartphone, like a Apple, like a iPhone or an Android. Smartphone demo morao koto ga dekiru you ni suru koto mo kangaete imasu. Okay, good. So now this here in the subject, the person doing this action, the ikanakute mo, the iku, that action, is not mentioned, right? So that's why you got to think about the context and read it through and try to fit it together. And this comma actually really helps just from a understanding point of view. If this was here, if this was a guy, I don't even know if that would make sense, but this, by putting this comma here, it kind of shows you that there may be a big separation conceptually. And the point is, it's not the government that's going to get this stuff, right? I mean, it could be, but it's probably the patient, or it could be a doctor, but someone, right? Basically, even if you don't go to the hospital to get the result, right? Smartphone de morao koto ga dekiru, right? So you could have just said, I don't know where this came from, but this person could have said moraeru, right? Which is the same thing as pretty much morao koto ga dekiru. It just sounds a little more formal. This looks like it came from maybe from a newspaper or something. But basically, here, and now we're getting to the grammar in question, right? No, dekiru yoni. So this is why it reminded me of this last meaning, which I wanted to chime in here. But basically, here it becomes to a state where you just say I will learn to play the piano well. Now this doesn't really like literally match up, but this is what this means. So here it's basically suru. Now this is a little different than the naru, because remember, naru is you will become good. I mean, you're not like forcing yourself to be good at playing the piano. Maybe that's the idea, but it's kind of happening, right? It's just you're becoming in a state where you're good at playing. This is yo ni suru, which is to do. And the koto, of course, is basically normalizing. I think it's the right word. It's talking about the verb kind of as a noun. It's talking about it. The verb is not necessarily happening, but it's talking about the verb, right? So, mo kangaete imasu. So let's just translate this one just for a little mini. George is saying it's an NHK article on coronavirus a few months ago. Okay, good, very timely topic. So let's just translate this one just because I know once in a while some people have interest in translation too. So I'm just gonna do it real quick, but it'll help everyone understand, I think. So basically, I'll just do a quick rough. The government is also considering. Right? Notice it was mo kangaeteru, and notice the word order gets totally switched around. That's why you have to think about it in your head before you can. You can't just translate it, right? So the government is also considering, right? Now this is the yoni suru. So the government is doing such that. In this case, they're making it so that, or making it such that, right? Is also considering, making it. And again, the it doesn't really match to the Japanese, but this is a natural way to render it. The government is also considering making it so that you don't, I'll just say people. There's a bunch of ways to say, I'll just use you for now, even though it's probably not the best translation. So that you don't have to go, and directly is not there, but I'm just gonna, it's implied in my opinion. Go directly to the hospital to receive, pick up, to get the results of the tests. Could be, we'll just say a test, right? Because we're talking in general. But so you know, but can just say and can get the results. So it's gonna be not literal, but I'm gonna try to make it natural, and can get the result via smartphone. All right, so again, this is quick. I'm not trying to get a perfect translation, but I think this is pretty good. The government is also considering making it so that you don't have to go directly to the hospital to get the results of a test, and can get the result via smartphone, right? So to summarize this one here, suru yo, or dekiru yo ni suru, right? That's really the key phrase. That it is, a little tricky, especially if you haven't seen them. So this is to make it that something is possible, right? Make it possible, right? Whatever that is. And this, of course, could be a different, another verb, right? Arukeru yoni suru, right? If somebody has a broken leg or something, arukeru yoni shite miseru, right? I'll, make it so you can walk. All right, so let's do the second sentence. Is this second sentence? Okay, this is tame. So we'll see if this is the same topic or not, but let's go over it. And I don't know how this is say. I would have to look this one up. Let's see how to do the reading of this. Looks like Hirose, okay? Definitely don't know all my kanji readings. All right, Hirose sensei wa koronavirus ga utsuranai you ni suru tame ni wa te o alcohol de shoudoku suru koto ga taisetsu da to jikken de mo wakarimashita to hanashite imasu. Okay, another semi-complex sentence, but it's a good one. So let's do this one here. And this is, the outside part is pretty easy, right? The doctor or the teacher says, it's probably a doctor because from the context, right? Is saying the thing in quotes, right? So let's just pull this out just to simplify it, right? So what is about this? What did this doctor say, right? So this is obviously coronavirus. Utsuranai, right? Utsuru is for basically for something to move, but it also has the connotation of like a kansensuru. So utsuru has a bunch of meanings, but the one we want is, I think there's another kanji, but this is one of the ways to write it. And you can see it's actually done in hiragana here, but it basically means kansensareru or kansensuru, which is basically infected, to be infected, or to be transmitted might be a better. Probably a better translation of that in this case. So we're obviously talking about coronavirus. And this is we're now at the grammar in question, right? Something yoni suru. Same idea, right? Now this tame, the good news is, because when I first heard the question, I was like, what is the connection between yo and tame? The good news is here, there's not really a connection. In other words, you can understand this part and then you can understand the tame. They're pretty conceptually separated. So just to kind of draw this out here, right? This piece here, right? And I think I got bold stuck there. This piece here means, right, to make such that coronavirus is not transmitted. Okay, so that's what that means. So now we have the tame, and this could be anything. It happens to have a yo sooner, but the yo, my point is it's not directly tied to the tame, right? It's not like the shika and the nai, which are really tightly connected. It's kind of a separate thing. So this is basically, just looking at this in a generic way, it's in order to do something, right? Te o alcohol de shoudoku suru koto ga. So this is te, which is hand, right? Of course, alcohol is this part. Shoudoku is to disinfect. Shoudoku suru koto ga, right? So the act of disinfecting. We're turning a verb into a noun so we can talk about it, right? Ga, taisetsu da, which is important, or important is, I guess, a good translation. Ga, where was I? Daiji dato, or sorry, taisetsu dato, jikken. So we have dato. So this is basically a quote inside of a quote. Right? Another reason this sentence is a little tricky, but it's a good sentence to talk about. So we have the one to here, and the other to is here. So we basically have a quote of a quote, which happens all the time, right? Especially in like a newspaper or something like that. So here, basically what this guy is saying is, we understood something. So this is not necessarily a quote as in what somebody said, but it's something that was understood, because the verb in question is wakarimashita, which is wakaru, right? And then jikken, which is of course experiment or experiments, could be either. It's probably plural. Demo, right? So also in experiments, right? So jikken de is like within or through an experiment, right? Jikken demo, also an experiment. So whatever this thing is, about wiping your hands and all that, washing your hands, was also understood in a different sense. Okay, so I think we have enough to start trying to translate this. So let me go back up here, and okay, so we can say Hirose. What do we call doctors? Doctor. Oh, I guess doctors. That's an obvious question. Dr. Hirose. Dr. Hirose said. Okay. Okay. So again, a lot of times you'll see when you're translating, or even when you're thinking about it, it gets reversed, right? Or the order gets switched around. So doctor says that, you know, we have, or just say it has been understood. Again, this is not literal, but you'll see where I'm getting. It has also been determined. And then again, this may not be perfect, but let's make a quick try at it. It has also been determined via experiments that that disinfection of hands via alcohol is important in order to prevent, and this is, I'm going to talk about this in a second, prevent coronavirus from spreading. Okay, so let me double check my English and then I'll talk about the details. Dr. Hirose said it has also been determined via experiments that disinfection of hands via alcohol is important in order to prevent CV from spreading. So I think that's a reasonable translation, at least for doing a quick effort. So notice, and you know, not just talking about translation, but we're also talking about understanding. Here I use the word prevent, right? So this is utsurunai yoni suru. All right, so this utsurunai yoni suru is to do such that it doesn't spread, it doesn't get transmitted, that type of thing. All right. So, and one other thing here I just want to mention, it's really hard to translate, but a good nuance is the niwa, right? In order, and this here, it basically says it's kind of setting it as a topic. So basically, like, in order for this, right? In other words, cleaning your hands may not help with other things, right? But it is going to help with this. It's not gonna do everything. It's not gonna solve world peace or anything, or you know. But it's for this, for the purpose of this, and this is like the topic, right? So for this, in other words, to prevent corona from spreading, it's important to disinfect your hands. So, and here, what else did I say? I said determined, right? So determined, you know, determined is kind of a word, I don't know if it has a direct mapping to Japanese, but wakaru is to understand, and this is talking about wakarimashita. So here, you know, wakaru doesn't have a subject here, right? But it's clear that he's probably talking about his lab or the people. But anyway, the bottom line is this English that I used, has been determined, is a very generic, right? It doesn't have it doesn't say who did it, right? Who understood. It's sort of like, oh, it's just, we figured it out. It was figured out. So this isn't technically the passive, right? Wakarimashita. You could say, I don't know, like hanmei sareta or something like that. Rikai sareta. There's a bunch of ways to say that. Shoumei sareta. This was similar meaning, but this is not in the passive, but I feel that this is a good way to render it. Anyway, so I want you to tell me, George, if that made sense for you or not. And I'm going to read this other comment. So that's my analysis. So Mr. Pichu is saying, and again, I'm just going to go ahead and put this here so we can see, because I don't have a plugin right now to show this. So thanks again for the comment, Mr. Pichu. So what he's saying is, so Yoni Suru does have some context that they're trying to make it a habit. Yeah, I would say most of the time. I mean, there could be cases it could habit. Now in this case here, right, it's not really a habit. It's to do such that. So what I would say is, like, this applies, the habit thing applies to suru or the like. Suru, yoni, suru. Like this is, I would just say, often used to refer to a habit, making a habit, right? And this, by the way, there's other literal ways to say, like you could say shukan o tsukeru yoni, shukan zuke, or something like that. There's different ways, but this is the indirect way. But in the case here, utsurunai yoni suru, I mean, it's not, the nuance of habit isn't there, right? So it's not necessarily, literally this is, you know, I do such that, do in order to. But in this case, especially when you have a non-past verb, a dictionary form verb with yoni suru, often it does map to a habit, but not necessarily. And the second part of your question or comment is, well, something like tamiru is just trying something. So yes, but not with the goal of it being something more, I guess. So yeah, so just to talk about the tamiru, because this is one, again, it's a very, sorry, I was just reading George's comment. I'll come back to that. But basically, this is another very common one. So shitemiru, right? Now, if you want to say you want to try something, and by the way, I think we're almost out of time and we're almost out of steam on this topic. So I'm going to do this one more topic and then we'll probably take a break for today, but we'll see how it pans out. So trying, right? So, してみる, right? It could be any verb in the te form, right? But してみる is to try and see, literally, right? Sorry, to do and see. So this could be like 頑張ってみる. 頑張ってみる. Right? 頑張ってみるよ. So the nuance is, it's I'm going to try or try hard and see, right? Which even in English, I mean, we kind of do use a phrase like that sometimes, but it's very common in Japanese. And it also has the nuance of to just try. You know, I'm going to try. And this one's tricky, right? Because gambaru means kind of like to try. And anyway, so this one's a little bit tricky to translate, but the point is I'm going to try and see, right? I'm going to make an effort to see. And the point of this is you don't know the result. It might work, it might not, right? And another one, and I want to mention this because this one's a really important point related to this topic, right? Shio to suru. And this one's tricky. It took me a while to figure out, so I just want to point it out in a kind of a side topic here. So, and this could be, you know, gambaro to suru, or a better example would be like oyogo to suru. I try to swim. Let's give a slightly better example. Tato to suru. Try to stand up. What's going on here? Tato. Okay. Sorry about that. I don't know why it's... Okay. Tato to suru. We can put it in kanji because it's actually a little bit easier to read. Tato to suru. There we go. So, and of course, tatsu is to stand, like I'm standing. Somebody's doing it. So basically, tato to suru. So this is basically, it's a little different than the yo, but it's actually, it almost is like tatsu yoni suru. It's actually pretty similar. I wouldn't say it's exactly the same, but it's actually pretty similar. I'm just going to say similar to, but what this has, the nuance of is basically tried, or how should I say, made an effort to do something, but usually it failed, right? So you almost always use this expression when something didn't work, right? 立とうとしたんだけど、立てなかった、できなかった, right? I tried to stand, but I couldn't, right? But if you wanted to say like, I tried standing up and then looked out the window, right? It would be like, 僕は立ってみて、そして窓の外を見た, something like that. So the point is, if you like achieved your goal, right? Or you might achieve your goal, right? You're going to use this te miru form. But typically, something that's already happened. I mean, this is very often in the past tense, right? I mean, tatou to suru. Like you typically wouldn't say like tatou to shio. Like that just sounds a little weird. This is typically used in the past tense. Tatou to shita. Tatou to shitan da kedo dekinakatta. Right? I tried to stand. Put that sentence down. Tatou to shitan da kedo dekinakatta. Okay, cool. So, and I see George's nice comment, outstanding breakdown of that sentence. My Japanese tutor struggled to explain it. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much. Kochiro koso arigatou gozaimasu. So thanks for the good examples, George. So I think we're about out of time, but I really wanted to thank all of you who are joining. And the live, I mean, to me is the best part because you get to ask questions and interact. But hopefully we'll get some other people viewing this at a future time. So I wanted to thank you all again, and check for my blog. I'm just in the middle of finishing up an interesting book right here. Purposely not showing the name, but I'm going to be putting a review on this in the next few days. It's an interesting book, so check back on the blog for that. And I think that's about it. So I got to figure out how to go to my editor or my studio program. So then let's see. All I need to do is go here, set this up, and then I say, I'll see you guys later.